You and your family are heading to the beach on a cool April afternoon. You start going to the beach and you feel the cool sand beneath your feet and the wind whipping through your hair. You ask yourself, what could be better than this? When you start heading down to the water, you see this, a sea turtle choking on plastic. This is becoming a common occurrence across all beaches around the globe, and it needs to stop. In order to understand my thesis, you need to understand some facts and statistics behind this issue. It's split into two categories, the causes and the effects. Let's first look at the causes and what is actually causing the plastic pollution. First, only 10% of all plastic bottles are being recycled. The other 90% are ending up in landfills or in the ocean. Second, the average person throws away 185 pounds of plastic away each year. If we take that number and times it by how many people are in the world, we get a huge number. 139 quadrillion pounds of plastic, potentially polluting the earth. And finally, in the last century, or in the last 10 years, we are producing more plastic than since in the last century. And the effects of this causes. First, there's 86.4 billion plastic fragments on the surface alone. No one knows how much plastic is beneath that. 1/3 of the fish in the ocean have a trace of plastic within them, whether in the digestive system or in the bloodstream. And it takes 150 years for a single plastic bottle to fully decompose. That is 7 times more than a styrofoam cup and more than 100 times than a plastic bag or a paper bag. These plastic products are just some of the few pieces in which we see on a daily basis. Plastic straws, plastic bottles, plastic bags, plastic containers, and plastic cup lids. These are the top leading 5 plastic pollutants that are producing the plastic problem. In order to understand a little bit about this argument, you need to understand what is plastic. Plastic is a synthetic material made from a wide range of organic polymers such as polyethylene, PVC, and nylon that can be molded into a shape. We've all seen plastic bottles and plastic containers, and they have those little numbers on the bottom. That determines which type of plastic and which chemicals are within them. We commonly see plastic 1 and 2, PETE or HDPE. Those are made in our plastic bottles, our plastic shampoo containers, our plastic food Tupperware, and our plastic laundry detergents. We are commonly using those, but what we don't really see are the plastics that are between 3 and 7. Those are bleach bottles, furniture, toys, CDs. They're also pollutants of the plastic issue. And what we also have to understand is, what is the environment? The environment is a habitat that is ecological in an environmental area inhabited by one or more living species. Specifically for this argument, you need to understand what the marine habitat is. The marine habitat can be split into 2 different types, the coastal and the open ocean areas. Now, when looking at the plastic pollution issue, there are 2 major categories. The first one is the pollution activists. Those are people who are on social media, as you've seen on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, who are posting about metal straws and telling people to use those rather than plastic ones. They can also be seen and portrayed by the media as people who have sit-ins on the beach. This can be a wide range of people. And the second is the EPA, or the Environmental Protection Agency. They are a government-controlled organization that makes legislation and laws based on environmental studies. The Environmental Protection Agency specifically has 6 laws in effect that have to do with plastic pollution. The first is the Clean Water Act of 1972. This has to do with the cleaning up of plastic, and which we'll go into a little bit later. The next is the Act to Prevent Pollution of Ships in 1987. This has to do with the illegal dumping of plastic off of onboard ships. The Shore Protection Act. This has to do with endangered species with their breeding and mating grounds. It made it illegal for plastic pollution to be within the area of this circumstance. Next is a build-off of the Shore Protection Act. It is the Marine Protection, Research, and Sanctuaries Act. This added a protection and research development portion of this act, allowing them to understand how much plastic is really within the area and allow them to research what type it is. Next is the Beach Act of 2000, which is the final product of the Shore Protection Act and the Marine Protection, Research, and Sanctuaries Act. It combined both portions into one conclusive act. And finally, the Marine Debris Research, Prevention, and Reduction Act of 2006. This specifically had to do with them in the open ocean picking up plastic and allowing them to track the original source of the plastic, allowing them to find the point origin source of the plastic. Now, as I said, we'll be going a little bit further into the Clean Water Act. The Clean Water Act was created in 1948 as originally named as the Federal Pollution Control Act, and it was the first major U.S. law having to do with water pollution. In 1972, the name was changed and it was amended. It was named from changed from the Federal Water Pollution Control Act to what is commonly known now as the Clean Water Act, or the CWA. In 1981, it went under its first set of revisions. It streamlined the municipal construction grant process, allowing them to build treatment facilities for the plastic. And then finally, it went under its final and second revisions, which took out the construction grants process and allowed them to create the State Water Pollution Control Revolving Fund, allowing each state an allotment of money based on a census that is taken every year to clean up the plastic pollution. Now, when we look at the CWA, we want to know what their goals are. They have 4 simple goals. The first one is establish the basic structure for regulating pollutant discharges into the water through the United States. Before this act, there was no structure based on what we have of previous data of who was the plastic, of how much plastic was being polluted, and they wanted to make sure that there was a structure set in place so that everyone was made accountable. Next, it gave the EPA the authority to implement pollution control programs, such as setting wastewater standards for the industry. They wanted to make sure that each company had a set limit of how much pollution and how much plastic that they were able to throw away. It made it unlawful for any person to discharge any pollutant from a point source origin to the navigable waters. Each state has their own different legislation. For us here in South Carolina, for per pound of plastic, it is $700 fine or 2 years in state prison. This differs from someone who's living in California or in Colorado or Wisconsin. Each state is allowed to create their own and individual rule. And finally, it recognized the need for addressing the critical issues of plastic that is in a non-origin source. We all have heard about the Great Garbage Patch, which just lies outside of California. It is a widespread area where plastic pollution is being brought to because of the tides and the currents of the waters. It is now becoming a threat to fishing industries, and also the environment under it. So what is wrong with the CWA? What is making it not applicable to the plastic pollution? Well, it has to do with the definition. Under the CWA, plastic pollution is not considered a hazardous material and is not regulated under the statute. So I believe that plastic pollution should be treated as hazardous waste and should be regulated under the Clean Water Act. I will also present the view that the improper disposal of plastic is destroying our marine ecosystems, harming our usable natural resources, and poses a threat to human health. What I will not be arguing is who is responsible for this pollution, which country is responsible for this pollution, and the other ecosystems that this affects. I do acknowledge that it does harm other ecosystems, but for the sake of this argument, we will specifically looking into the marine habitats. The first point, destroying marine ecosystems. NOAA, or the Nautical Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, did a Pacific Ocean study. They studied 100 square miles and took pollution from the top. They were able to conclude that 98 miles of that area had plastic pollution within it. That is a lot of plastic pollution, and if we take that and times it by how many miles are within the ocean, I can't even think of how much plastic there is. Next is the Great Barrier Reef. The Great Barrier Reef is believed to be dying due to the plastic pollution. Plastic pollution is being stuck on the coral areas and getting stuck in the environment, pushing fish away from their habitats and having them migrate further away, which is now leaving the Great Barrier Reef broken and deserted. And finally, the Sea Grant. Sea Grant is an independent South Carolina company located here just in Charleston. They produce surveys allowing us to understand about plastic pollution a little bit more. In this specific survey about the coastlines, they surveyed all the coastlines, walking up and down them, picking up plastic pollution, and really told us how much plastic pollution is really hitting our beaches. In that survey, over 65% of the beaches here in South Carolina have plastic pollution on them. And that is a lot, because if you take that and times it by how many coastlines are within the entire United States, who knows how much plastic is there? Next, it is harming the usable natural resources. Sea Grant also did a survey of the fish. They caught 250 fish off of the coast of South Carolina, and they opened them up. They were able to tell that 199 of those fish had plastic pollution within their digestive system and their blood circulation. So if we take that and we take it further, ultimately we eat the fish. So we are transposing that plastic chemicals into our body. And we'll go a little bit further into that in a second. Next is China's drinking problem. China is now posing a threat to drink water because of how many microplastics are within the water. If you don't know, microplastics are the tiny little particles of the decomposition of plastic. Over time, as it deteriorates, it doesn't deteriorate into one piece. It deteriorates into small, different, tiny little pieces in which our filters are not able to pick up. So now China's having an issue with their drinking problem because of how much plastic is on their beaches and within their water control. And based off of that, NOAA did a water survey. They took 1,000 participants, took blood samples for each one of them, and was able to find that the chemicals that are in plastic that is hazardous and ultimately life-threatening were within the blood, now posing a real threat to the water. Finally, the threat to human health. BBC, or the British Broadcasting System, did a plastic consumption project. As you can see here, there are two plastics that are completely harmful for the people, DDT and PCB. Those two plastics are being digested by the fish. Now, who eats the fish? Ultimately, we do. And so we are now transferring that plastic particles into our body. And our bodies are not capable of overcoming these plastic effects. NOAA also did an Asian Pacifica study. Due to the Asian culture, they are forced to eat fish almost up to 3 times a day. And because of the fish consumption, they are consuming more plastic than on the average person. Therefore, people are dying due to this plastic consumption. In their 2018 and 2019 summer report, they reported that 30,000 people died due to plastic pollution and plastic chemicals being within their body. One of the greatest counter-arguments to this issue is why plastic? Why not styrofoam? Why not paper like they did before? And it's one simple reason: the decomposition rate. If we look here, paper towels and any majority of the paper products typically deteriorates between 2 to 6 weeks. And if we look here, foam plastic cups or anything having to do with styrofoam takes about 50 years. But look at the two leading largest areas. They're both plastic. Plastic bottles and fishing line can take up to 450 years to 600 years to fully decompose. That is up to 8 times longer than our lifespan. Think about how many more generations and how many more different animals will be affected due to this issue. Plastic pollution is ultimately harming our ecosystems, harming us, and harming our usable natural resources. And we can't allow that to continue. Thank you.